Destiny 2 has gotten to a point in its lifetime, when you actually think about it, it is quite old. I'm sure a majority of people that just joined with us won't even know that Catalyst came out in Season 3. Let me say it again, Season 3. Nearly 5 whole years of Destiny ago is when Catalysts were first introduced. Now, nowadays, I'm not going to lie, Catalysts are pretty damn nifty. If you actually look at the history of Catalysts and things, either there's something like Exderis or Centrifuge, which when you actually look at them and see what they do, it is kind of freaking nifty, because, like, in the case of both, they both are subclass relevant. They either add Amplify or benefit from Amplify. They are subclass relevant, which nowadays is something that's really important when it comes to making a decent enough build, is having subclass relevancy. And then you look at a few other things, like Vexcalibur and the recent renditions of Dead Man's Tale and Revision Zero, which is basically a build-your-own catalyst where it's pretty simple, and they'll add something that spices up the gun. It'll be a simple perk like Fourth Time's Charm, Grave Robber, maybe even Unrelenting, which is a small enough perk that it can have a benefit to the thing, even while not being exactly unique or subclass specific. Still, decent enough catalysts. And then going down the line, there's of course the ones that are more unique to the gun, like for Manticore, in the case of benefiting its original perks, that makes sense because they benefit the original perks. But then you look down the line of variety of catalysts, and the further you go towards the start of the line, the more you realize that some things are quite outdated. In the form of things like Tommy's Matchbook, it's supposed to benefit the gun itself, but it isn't really a noticeable catalyst at that point. And while it has been getting buffs here and there, the catalyst really doesn't do anything to really spice it up in the long run. And then you look at a variety of other things, like things that just don't have a catalyst, or things like Risk Runner. You think its catalyst would be nice, but what it literally just does is give it more range. Literally, that's all it does. That little gold bar right there is all it does. It increases the effective range of the gun. And when you actually look at the full list of exotics, the majority of the exotics that existed when Catalyst came out were kind of stiffed in that way. Like, going through some of the Crucible-only exotics, which, by the way, are severely outdated in how you get them, because just working on Suro's regime, I'm feeling the age, because I remember working on the Jade Rabbit Catalyst when I first got it. That took, like, 3 whole days of playing Crucible to finish. 250 doesn't sound like a lot, but in comparison to the 500 PvE enemies that you have to kill for a majority of Catalyst, 250 in Crucible is actually going to take a while. On an average of 10 kills a game, it would still be 25 games, which is surprisingly how Suros is going. It's about 10 to 15 kills a game, with the exception of when I get absolutely stomped and rolled, which will take even longer. So, not only is there some catalysts that are outdated in the form of getting them, like going into Crucible and using them for perks that are neglectable, like Mida gets Outlaw. Its speed reload is already good. Jade Rabbit, it got range and stability buff. For Crucible, might be cool, but compared to a benefit that is something like of getting amplified or getting a heal on kill, that is quite underwhelming. And Suros is a perfect example of nearly there, but almost there. Because you know what the Suros Catalyst does? It's pretty simple. It pretty much just increases the percent chance that the Suros perk itself of heal will activate, and improves its recoil direction. Which, in terms of Crucible, actually not that bad. It sounds pretty solid. But it is still one of the most outdated catalysts in the game. This was one of the first wave catalysts that came out. Literally, this is one of the most unique catalysts for the time. Because if I go through the list of year 1 exotics that got something simple, you're going to be amazed. So Sweet Business actually had something that was unique. It reduces flinch, which for year 1 is still pretty not unique. Sturm is a reload speed buff, if I remember correctly. It's a basic stat buff. Then a variety like other things, Vigilance Wing got Encore, which used to be full auto, which is practically useless. Mida got Outlaw. Suros has what I mentioned. Jade Rabbit has what it mentioned. Huckleberry, it used to have Ambitious Assassin, but it actually got reworked, so now it only has like a max refill, if I recall. But then you go into other things. Sunshot, range and stability buff. Merciless, range and reload speed buff or something like that. Skyburners, just a reload speed buff. Like I mentioned with Risk Gunner, just a range buff. Borealis, that just gets stability. when you go through the list of a variety of other guns that existed in year one that got catalysts when they first came out, the catalysts were cherries on top. There was nothing that was supposed to make the gun broken. But when you look back through the history of catalyst, when Jotun got its catalyst, it had 2 perks to it. Cornered and Incandescent. Both really good with the gun. Both made it just, instead of a cherry on top, it was a whole cherry farm on top. Same thing with things like the infamous Izanagi's Burden. It wasn't anything to go home about except for the Crucible crowd and maybe even the Gambit crowd. Then its catalyst turned it into one of the go-to PvE god guns of all time. Anytime a world's first or a build is being made, if you don't consider Izanagi at one point for a fast damage build, you're missing out. And it goes on and goes on. Like, a variety of guns got catalysts that were underwhelming, but nifty. Arbalest got Genesis, which made it work. Bad Juju's catalyst extended the duration of its buff. Could use a rework, but it's still good enough on its own. Le Monarque got Unrelenting, which, after being anti-overload at the same time, was a very cherry on top because it didn't make it OP, and it made it only better. And the variety of broad catalysts there are some that are incredibly simple, like the go-to of giving things auto-loading, like Ariana's Vow and Witherhoard. Then the go-to of giving things extended ammo reserves. 2 of the oldest grenade launchers in the game that are exotic, literally their catalyst just gives them more ammo. Yet they don't see usage anywhere in the game. Colony maybe in PvP, but the last time I saw Colony or Prospector anywhere but people trying to finish the catalyst just so they can finish them is exceptionally low. Not to mention Darcy. It recently gotten the ability to jolt targets, but what does this one's catalyst do? It gives it stability. Sure, it maxes out, but at the same time, it got jolting, and when people still did damage tests with this, it was still incredibly underwhelming. It used to be the go-to damage option for Scourge of the Past when it existed, but now it is high negligible for even a considerable damage option. Most people, when they do damage testing, they see how it does, and then immediately switch to something better to see how lacking it is in comparison. And not to mention, there is a broad majority of things that are kind of outdated, Queenbreaker being one of them outside of Gambit. It doesn't even have a catalyst. Could make it something nifty. And granted, Bungie has been going back and giving catalyst to things that do need them. Monte Carlo got its Bayonet catalyst. Frickin' Malfeasance got Vorpal, which when you think of it, is very simple, but it works, because this is pretty good. It has intrinsic anti-champion. Vorpal works. But then you look at things like Sunshot that got range and stability in addition to its buffs with this season. If it got something like Unrelenting, Outlaw maybe, that would be a nifty little thing. It would be more worth getting a catalyst and actually putting in the effort. Because when you look at PvP, sure, range and stability, great. When you look at PvE, range and stability are useless. Like, anyone would probably prefer reload speed or higher impact or just damage buffs. So, there is a broad majority of catalysts that are plenty outdated, if not in its way to earn, in what they do. So how long until Bungie looks at the broad majority of first wave catalysts and say, hey, we actually got to fix these? Because yes, they have been going through and buffing guns. Like I said with Tommy's Matchbook, hell, it's Skyburner's Oath. They both got the ability to scorch on their own. It's still nifty and subclass relevant. But the catalyst nigh does nothing. Because sure, reload speed is nice, but if somebody actually wanted reload speed, they can always add a loader or an exotic that buffs their reload speed in some form of way. So in the end, is it really worth having a catalyst that just gives reload speed? Or could they do something like add Incandescent, add Unrelenting, add Outlaw, Triple Tap? The broad majority of things they added to Revision Zero and to all of the versions of Dead Man's Tale and Dead Messenger, all of those perks that they gave those things could fit in and actually benefit a lot of these other exotics in ways that would deeply benefit them. Like, I imagine if you added 4 times the charm to something like Suros, it might be nuts. If you added something like Unrelenting to Sweet Business, might be nuts. But at the same time, Bungie is too afraid that it would be too nuts to even consider it. So, is there a majority of Destiny 1 Year 1 or Destiny 2 Year 1 catalysts that need reworking? Yes, there is desperately a number of them. But at the same time, I don't think Bungie is afraid, or I think Bungie is too afraid of what might happen if some of these guns get more than just a basic stat buff. With that, my name is Matt Scorpion, and I will see you in the next video.